One of Australia's most interesting Indigenous artists has a new show kicking off this weekend at the Queensland Gallery of Modern Art. It's Archie Moore, who became famous to most Australians, I think, at the Venice Biennale last year with an exhibit called Kith and Kin. Tim Douglas is the Australian's arts editor. Tim, walk us through Kith and Kin. What is it?
Basically, it's a huge kind of darkened square, 60 metres of wall, inclusive of the ceiling, which is part of the work, that reveals 65,000 years of genealogy that relates specifically to the artist and to humankind.
Kith and kin means, in the familiar sense, friends and family, but I was interested in an earlier English definition of kith, which meant countrymen or of one's own land. So I thought that was more of a Indigenous understanding that English people had and connection to the land.
We all have a family that goes back, thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. Not many of us could name more than maybe 3 or 4 generations. What was your personal experience of walking through that space? Were you thinking about, how far your own family goes back?
When I was there was a line for one pavilion and one pavilion only, and that was the Australia Pavilion. As we got closer to the front of the line, people were coming out of that pavilion with tears streaming down their faces. It was incredibly emotional to see that. To give an experience of what it's like, I mean, you come out from the blazing blue sky Venice in high summer and you walk into this darkened box. These white outlines kind of appear like stars in the night sky, this kind of shimmers, these ghosts, these spirits that kind of appear before your eyes. And once you realise what's going on, it can become quite overwhelming. But another very important part of that work that speaks also to that idea are these pages in the middle of this reflective pool.
I've used white chalk on blackboard paint as a way to reference the school curriculum. When I went to school, there was nothing mentioned about Indigenous history. It was all about the colonial project, agriculture, those kind of things, and nothing about my own Indigenous history was taught at school.
A table is, of course, a Western piece of furniture, and it's plonked there right in the middle of this sacred space. That's a very interesting choice, isn't it? And it's intriguing that you initially walked right past it.
You're right. It's a very interesting object to be in the room. The true power of it lies in the reflective pool around which the table with these documents representing Indigenous deaths in custody. You have to reach across the table to see what these documents actually mean. And in so doing, you catch your own reflection. For me, that was probably the most powerful part of that entire work, because it takes the artwork from being about someone else's life, someone else's history, to a very real and visceral understanding that you are inextricably part of this story too.
It's a very fragile work, isn't it, in the sense that chalk on a blackboard can be rubbed out and presumably has to be rubbed out when this work is dismantled. What happened to the iteration of it at the Biennale, and has he had to recreate it for Queensland? He
has recreated it. That was dismantled at the end of the Biennale last year, and it will be recreated for the first time since that period in Quagoma in Brisbane from this weekend. Archie Moore's life hasn't been easy. Life as an artist isn't easy, and his point is that Indigenous life in this country, especially over the last couple of 100 years, has not been easy. The real point of this work, of course, is it's about genealogy. It's about interrupted genealogy. I'm not sure Archie Moore works in a way that's easy. I think he needs things to be difficult. He asks difficult questions, and he's not afraid, clearly, to get his hands dirty in the process.
He won the Golden Lion at Venice. How significant was that as an achievement?
So the Leone d'Oro, my Year 7 Italian teacher, Professor Ressa Cleary, will be hopefully impressed by that pronunciation, is kind of the highest award in the cultural sector. Now, the participation in the Giardini is the apotheosis of those awards. So it is a huge honour. Now, Archie Moore was a bit of a bolter, came out of nowhere. He's only the second Indigenous artist to have ever represented Australia since the Australian participation began in 1954.
So what does Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art look like for this new generation?
I think it's a great question. And I think it's really important too that evolution happens. And I think we see that. I mean, I was up in Darwin for the National Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander Awards recently, and the amount of work that's coming out of some of those areas, especially the Yolngu, is quite incredible. He's a very humble artist, and I think once you see his work in situ, it is a great testament to the artist himself, but also there's a visceral quality to that work that speaks to something broader than the artist himself.
Australia's next outing at the Venice Biennale is next year, 2026, and our artist is going to be Khaled Sabsabi, a Sydney man who has been subject to a big controversy. He was commissioned for the Biennale, then the commission was withdrawn by Creative Australia in a bit of a panic after it was revealed by The Australian that some of his previous artworks were apparently unknown to Creative Australia. They hadn't actually gone and checked them out before they gave him the gig. Then they gave it back to him. He's now preparing his work for Venice. Presumably he'll be giving us a very different take on what Australian identity is or what it means to be an Australian today. What are you expecting from Khaled Sabsabi?
I think it's going to be a really interesting time for Australia. I mean, clearly it's going to be a controversial moment when that pavilion is open and this artwork is revealed to us. If there's any stage on which controversy or otherwise might be best played out, it's at Venice. It is a great history of controversy, of launching amazing artists, of having sometimes difficult conversations. Maybe that's exactly the right place to have a difficult conversation.
The risk was, I think, at one point that we wouldn't have had an exhibition at all at Venice. What would that have meant for us if that had been the case?
I think that'd be a disaster, Claire, personally. I mean, we've been continually represented at Venice since 1954. And I think, to sacrifice that at the altar of politics would be a disaster of the highest order. We've got such a great creative vibe that runs through this country, and so many fantastic artists and curators especially that put on these works. And look, Archie Moore is a great example of someone that we might not have paid a lot of heed to in this country until he's on the international stage. Sometimes artists like that get overlooked in the national conversation. And so, I really hope that what we see is big and bold and interesting.